Singh, who is MD at and the tech lead at UBS. So very diverse panel, and we'd be love, all of us would be really interested in terms of the kind of opinions and the perspectives that they hold on deep tech. I'll start with Sir. In fact, Sir, as a matter of fact, Startup India falls under you. Government always acts as an enabler. What are the things, what are the steps that you see are being taken positively on behalf of the government to enable deep tech in India?
So, thanks for joining us today here. India has a very, as many of you would have noticed, particularly those who are from India, that India now has a very vibrant, very dynamic startup ecosystem. We say it is the third largest of the world. We have over 115,000 of these startups recognized. We don't say registered, but recognized in DPIIT's portal. We've tried to facilitate them through a combination of different measures. That includes, provision of seed funding, or creating a fund of funds for them, which in turn can channelize money to startups through these AIFs, the alternative investment funds. In addition, we've tried to sort of ensure that a facilitative environment is created at the state level by, ranking states and state governments on the basis of their policy ecosystem for encouragement of startups. And that, in fact, those awards were given away only last week in Delhi for the current edition, and I think Gujarat, Kerala, and a couple of other states are the top achievers in that area. We've also tried to create, a mentorship platform through DPIIT's portal, which is called Marg. We have a startup mission, which is manned by a very dedicated team of officers. So we try to help with handholding, support, mentoring, the rest of it as well. But coming back to today's topic, deep tech in particular, there is increasingly a recognition that for deep tech startups in particular, maybe we need to do more. And the kind of stuff that we've done may not work for deep tech, where there is a greater funding requirement, a longer gestation period, more research requirements, and perhaps much more assurance on the procurement side of providing orders and, funding the prototype and taking it all the way to commercialization and beyond. So, in fact, DPIIT, along with the principal scientific advisor to the Government of India, is in fact working on a deep tech policy. It's available in the public space right now for comments, suggestions. We intend to take it forward to the government and thereafter create a separate funding arm or a funding window for deep tech startups. We would also like to work, as our defense department has worked on creating a procurement system for these type of startups. The IDEX program has worked very well with many of our defense startups. I'm sure both of you would have had some benefits from that, but the impression I have, and I'm sure you share that impression, is that even there, the much of the attraction has come from one particular branch of of our armed forces, which is the Navy. Many of the other two arms perhaps are not moving quite as swiftly, but still it's a good template to adopt, and maybe we could adopt it in other sectors as well. So yeah, these are broadly the areas: the procurement, dedicated funding window, along with a fresh policy to bring people together when it comes to deep tech startups, is what Government of India has in the works for this sector. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'll come to Captain Nikunj now. Captain Nikunj, sir focused on something. You're an IDEX winner. And how easy or how difficult is it to sustain a deep tech startup? Your views will be critical on that count.
So we started with almost $5,000, initial seed capital in somewhere in 2015. And 2017, we left India and came to Europe in Rotterdam, where we were supported by the Dutch government. So I left India, went to Dutch, and then in 2018, I came back in India. And that is the time when the overall startup policy was also shaping up. New policies were coming, especially from DPIIT. In defense tenders, when you participate, you're supposed to give something called the EMD, an earnest money deposit. And this itself was the biggest challenge for a startup like this. So that was abolished to a larger extent. And that's where a fund was started by the Oil and Natural Gas Corporation of India. And we were one of the initial players who secured this fund. After securing this fund, what happened was then you move it. You need orders, right? And proceeding into the orders was again a most complicated part because when you look at defense, and as rightly said, Sir said, there are three armed forces: Army, Navy, and Air Force. Who are the first takers? This is the biggest challenge. And for any deep tech startup, especially working in the defense sector, proving a product was a toughest task. And that's where IDEX came in. Now, IDEX as a startup, when we look across, while I'm talking to you, we have almost on the verge of bagging a contract over $80 billion. So today, uh, and this has been possible due to a framework where the government has taken a lot of initiatives, especially from the MOD inputs from DPIIT in this regard, where you complete your prototype and you go ahead for really the purchase part, which is the forces. And in this case, we were lucky we were working with the Navy. Navy has the highest rate also in terms of indigenization. So the journey to reach here has been challenging. It has its ups and downs. Investments have been by the government. So again, I would say the second entity which invested in us was Maharashtra Aerospace and Defense Fund, where MIDC was again an investor along with the IDBI Bank. So we have come to this stage due to the government, I would say. We have not raised capital from any private equity player. And when we look at the private equity player and even venture funds or sovereign funds, the moment you go to them to raise money, the question is ESG policy. With the ESG policy, nobody is going to invest in you when you're a pure deep tech defense startup. So that's where we all have to work. And I think that's rightly said by Sir. We are working towards setting up that AIF.
So Agni, I'll come to you. Yes. So Agni, I'll come to you. As a matter of fact, you raised private capital. How easy or difficult is it for a deep tech company to prove its mettle to an investor?
Well, I think very well said by the Secretary, sir, in the sense that progressive government policies are the reason why startups like SIRS as well as Garuda Aerospace has thrived in the drone ecosystem, as well as in the defense space. And particularly for us, we have marked our own niche in the precision agricultural drone segment. Today, we control a 55% market share. The Honorable Prime Minister, when I first met him, I was so flabbergasted in the manner in which he was so passionate about how drones can make a difference in India in multiple multi-billion-dollar segments and sectors in our country. And his passion really has driven a lot of progressive government policies like the production link incentives, supporting indigenization, ensuring that there are loans under the Agricultural Infra Fund for agri-drone owners, ensuring that there is a 40 to 50% government subsidies for rural entrepreneurs who are purchasing drones, and 80% of subsidies for women who turn into rural entrepreneurs. Recently, the Honorable Prime Minister had launched a Namo Drone Didi, where 15,000 women from self-help groups will be trained, skilled, and ensured that they will be provided a drone to ensure that they will be spraying fertilizers and pesticides and utilizing drones for crop monitoring and multiple other applications, including logistics in rural areas. If these policies did not exist, and if the government segment did not were not proactive enough in the last 4 to 5 years, Garuda would never have raised private capital, nor would we have been a profitable business. Today, we have nearing $20 million in revenue, 3 years straight in terms of profitability. And when you speak to investors, whether it's Davos or elsewhere, they always look at sustainable startups, profitable startups, and especially when you're talking about deep tech, a strong tech stack, but that enables for you to be profitable and sustainable, and you can scale not just within India, but globally. And Garuda happens to be one of those success stories thanks to Invest India, Startup India, and all of these progressive policies that have been channelized by the government. And I'm very grateful, sir, and let me publicly thank you and the Startup India team and the Invest India team, because such facilitations and felicitations of budding young entrepreneurs is all the encouragement that we needed. Because even before we get into the pitch deck rooms with VC funds and investors, we have enough people to discourage us and push us down at our own levels. And for the government to step in, and especially in the last 4 to 5 years, and that is why we've had so many unicorns, so much of jobs, so many young people in technology, and a huge kudos to the government for the same. Thank you.
Thanks, Kalyan, I'll come to you as a CTO of HCL Tech, which I would consider generally a system integrator and a large company. how exactly should the R&D and the technology commercialization, as far as deep tech is concerned, be enabled?
So thanks for having me in the panel. And I think it's an honor to be here and really inspired by some of this young, amazing deep tech startups. So I want to correct a few interesting things about HCL.
Uh-huh.
HCL was actually founded with some government little investment by a small agency called Uptron. In 1976, Mr. Nader, who's still the majority, and Shivan Roshni now the chair of this thing. To go back, it was India's first original garage startup.
Yeah.
$200, 10,000 rupees, maybe even less value at that point in time. Started in a small Barsati. The whole idea was when IBM Coke left India, you had to really build computers. We had nothing, correct? We had to make our own PC, our own server, then we realized we will buy the operating system. Those whatever, PAN and other stuff. Wrote our own operating system, wrote our own database. That's the origins of HCL. As the economy opened, things morphed. We became an engineering and R&D services. Our biggest part of our business is actually doing R&D globally, correct? And a lot of this. But as things morphed of 2015, the founder came back and said, we make stuff for everywhere else. We now have access to capital. HCL Tech is a pretty large, growing private company. We should build HCL software. Just to give you an interesting, HCL software is the India's largest enterprise software product business, 1.5 billion revenues, 45,000 crores is the money capital, which has been invested on intellectual property. We've acquired, built organically R&D. Maybe 10% of that is in deep tech.
Yeah.
But we own core fundamental tech. We own technology which US government uses and other parts of the world uses. 132 countries we operate. We acquired a lot of technology from IBM, we then acquired from Cisco, but also organically built up a lot of assets. So one of the things which we need to talk about Make in India, we miss this aspect that we are manufacturing focused. But as we are building, as everything becomes digital, owning intellectual property is extremely going to become important. So we have taken the first step as a segment within HCL Tech, as HCL Software, building we are a 5-year-old business with 1 billion ARR, growing at about 5%. We don't want to be like those mad rush growth where we just want to grow and burn someone else's capital. Profitable, sustainable growth with a very clear aspect of owning intellectual property. Now coming to deep tech, we own some very interesting assets in cybersecurity. So we own the entire software supply chain security with a core R&D team split between India, Bangalore. We've got a very deep security research team in Israel working for us to build IP for us, not to be owned there. Looking at this from a very different lens, we're building some deep amount of work in embedded FPGA, which can enable some of the things that you guys are doing. We started to work very closely with various Section 8 companies and touch points. We're trying to educate and start to engage back in India. So India is going to be a big focus for us. We own technologies in commerce, MarTech, CDP, a lot of foundational technologies where you can build on top of that and not worry about who owns the IP.
Right.
So just to give you
Thanks, Kalyan. To come to you, Tanvi. As someone who's operated in the space of deep tech for a large financial company and also outside the country at this point of time, how do you see the best practices from this particular geography, especially Switzerland, being translated back to India? What would be your suggestions as such?
Lots.
Sir is here. Sir is here to
I'm very honored and happy to be here.
Right.
I'm an Indian origin, last 13 years here in Switzerland, and Switzerland has been very open hands to me and my family. And so there's so much we can do as a bridge between the two countries, especially when it comes to technology. And unlike very many other places, people complain about racialism and not seeing the brown and the black amongst the whites, but here in Switzerland, it did not matter. In fact, there's a prestige of Indians, moving around on Bahnhofstrasse or Paradeplatz because we are considered intelligent, we are considered technologically savvy. So there's a lot of respect in Switzerland, so to say, for the Indian diaspora. For the last 13 years, I have the taste of being part of the university. Decided to go back to university after having more than a decade of a very good corporate career. Tea and toilets that it becomes, right? You kind of leave the deep tech part of it, and all you're managing is 5,000 people. That's a very common thing. And at that point in time, people would ask you, oh, you work for XYZ company, how many people do you manage? And if it's less than 1,000, they won't speak with you. Now the conversation is very different. People ask you, what do you do? And what's your return of investments on the assets you own, whether it's the data or the people or the technology per se. So I've seen that sort of change coming in. And for the very long time, it felt to be great as an Indian here in the community. And then the whole space where all of the tech companies started to see the Indian CEOs coming in, that was amazing. And I would always wonder, and most of us would wonder, why are we the CEOs of the billionaires building in deep tech? Why aren't we the billionaires? Because we are doing the hard work, right? If you look at ETH as one of our strongest and biggest university, it has a big barrier for Indians to come in bachelor's because it's purely German, I should say Swiss German at certain points. But look at the number of Indians for the masters, for the PhDs, and the kind of research they do. In fact, every other person at the Equality Lounge that I have met has something to do with ETH. And if they are speaking Hindi, and there's more Hindi, by the way, on the road than German, if you have noticed, they all come in from a very strong set of education that is very Western, that has been able to bridge that sort of ecosystem between India and the Western world. But I would relate to your experiences. People do their PhDs, they try to do something in India, they want to get back home, they want to enjoy Diwali, but it's very hard to generate money. So I've seen lots and lots of very bright Indians come to Germany, few of them in Switzerland. It's hard to live here. It's super expensive for the startups. But the ecosystem continued to grow. And in my experience working not in deep tech, we in UBS don't do deep tech, or the big Swiss banks don't do deep tech, but we work with a lot of deep tech companies. A whole lot of them that are on the promenade here is who we get to work with. And you see that common angle of where the CEO is always going to be someone from the Western world, the CTO is going to be an Indian, right? So it's amazing to see what is being built in India and how the government is tend to supporting it for the last 2 to 3 years. After COVID, I had in November, part of the Algorand Foundation. I'm also on the board of Global Blockchain that makes me travel across. And it was so amazing to see so many graduates, so many masters who do not going to work for a company and do their own startups. That is not the spirit I had seen in India before COVID. See that sort of change. A very small piece of advice as you continue to grow the ecosystem on deep tech, it's a camel story. It's not a horse story. It stores in a lot of water. It goes slowly, but would go through the desert. And once it gets there, it gets you your objects that you had on it. So deep tech is a camel, while most of the fintechs are the horses, right? So it takes a whole ecosystem on building up the camels. And India has started to do this, but I cannot iterate it more. It's so important from day one to partner with industry. It should not be research only. That doesn't last anywhere. If the partnership is with the industry, if the partnership is with global players, as we have seen in the two amazing examples both of you shared, the sky's the limit what India can do. So I'm very proud to be part of this conversation and very happy to help and support anything that we in ETH or the Switzerland ecosystem would like us to help.
Thanks, Tanvi. Sir, she spoke about a very important point on return on investment. As somebody who's at the helm of the startup ecosystem and as an enabler, what's your message to a global tech investor in terms of deep tech investing in India?
You're quite right. The fintech, you'll find that out of the 100 unicorns that we have in India right now, I think 1 in 5 is a fintech company, and that has leveraged the digital public infrastructure that India has built up, combined with its the very good coverage of 5G services across the country, very low data costs, and the payment systems that we've built up, which are probably unique and perhaps the best in the world, which is why our real-time payment transactions in India now are almost 50% of the world's. So yeah, I mean that area has kind of taken off on its own. There are other areas which need much more of handholding and support, which is what we are talking about here. But obviously, these are the areas where, because of the IPR being created, because of the knowledge being created, you are going to have returns for a lot longer, and which is why it's important for funds from other parts of the world to invest in these, because you'll find that the kind of growth potential that India offers is pretty much unmatched around the world now that China is, its population is aging and its growth rate is also flagging. India is on the other side of that equation. So yeah, I mean, I think the case for investing in Indian deep tech startups with strong, technology potential combined with technology solutions rather, combined with the talent that India has. I mean, it's a pretty compelling case, I would say, for investing in those startups. And of course, in India, we've tried now to create, or we are in the process of creating our own financial offshoring centers, such as Gift City in Ahmedabad, where we intend to sort of provide the foreign capital to also come in and directly invest in Indian startups without necessarily having to go offshore or abroad.
Right, sir. Captain Nikunj, coming to you. In fact, you just mentioned that you went to the Netherlands and you came back. That's one of a rare case. But how does the ecosystem, or rather the Indian ecosystem, attract and retain human resources on deep tech inside India?
I think the first thing you have to look out across in Europe, especially, they celebrate their startups. The celebration of startup is very important.
Right.
Like how we have started doing the National Startup
Startup
Award, celebrating the National Startup Day. This is very important. That recognition itself creates the buzz. So I remember in 2017 when we were selected as one of the top 10 maritime startups there in the Netherlands, we were covered in the major papers across the EU. Now, something like that had never happened in India. And that celebration gives you a kind of motivation which is completely different, much more than even when you raise the revenue. This is one part. Second is the grants. When you're looking in terms of grant, the grant support is in Europe especially is at a different level. When you look at the country-wise, for example, if I look at the Dutch ecosystem, they give you a feasibility grant, then give you a look at the market grant and the product grant, and you could look at exploration to the other countries also if you have to scale up in your market space. We don't have that here in India yet. So these grants are very important, and the grants have to move away from DST and TDB only, where we are looking at. It has to be at the local level, where Maharashtra State Innovation Society is going to get allocated a fund of around 200 crores now. More generic, more policy-based grants. If we bring that in with this adder of grant, and then we set up AIF, especially for startups in our sectors, I think you are going to get a lot many startups staying back here in India. Because if Saga Defense could survive plainly on the defense business and sticking to only defense, and if you ask me how many customers I have 3: Army, Navy, and Air Force. I don't have anybody.
You don't need anybody.
I don't need anybody. So that's a reality. So if we have the thank you.
To put on a futuristic hat on yourself, in terms of deep tech, like new trends that are emerging?
I think emerging technology itself is such a beautiful evolution in the last, it has seen evolution in the last anywhere between 5 to 7 years. And what the COVID pandemic, however unfortunate it was, particularly in the drone and the automation sector, you have seen a forcible adoption of automation after the COVID crisis. So it has pretty much accelerated the deep tech, emerging tech, fintech, edtech, medtech, anything related to tech and AI. You have seen a lot more adoption at the grassroots levels, not just in major tier 1 cities, not just in global superpowers, but also in the developing worlds and the underdeveloped nations as well. And I feel that with a growing youth population, I can only put on my hat for India, Anak. I'll put on the India hat. And I would say that with the largest population in the world, with 52% of our country under the age of 30, we are a very young and potentially, if we are skilled with emerging tech and deep tech in our school education system, sir, where I hopefully feel that through your blessings and recommendations, if we could incorporate startups as part of our educational curriculum in the school and the college time itself, because those are times where youngsters can be honed and groomed, rather than just being told that, hey, listen, why don't you get a job at HCL? Why don't you get a job at Google? Why don't you get a job at Facebook? Rather, be your own boss, be an entrepreneur, a rural entrepreneur or an urban entrepreneur, a part of the gig economy. Because I think that is what all of these tech-based companies will drive a lot of a gig economy space in the future. You will start to see a lot more people self-reliant, self-sufficient, and people working for themselves, working their own hours, a lot more flexible working, but they will be paid for a particular task rather than a 9 to 5 job. That is the evolution that I see technology, deep tech will enable in the future. And I believe that India is going to drive that innovation. India is going to be the superpower when it comes to deep tech because of the combination of progressive government policies along with a very, very young, motivated, passionate youth population.
Great. I think those are some things that I've actually taken some notes of. But coming to you, Kalyan, as a matter of fact, being from a giant and also making globally competitive some value-added products, how do you see that ecosystem evolving in India as far as, creating those kind of products are concerned? Deep tech is typically about a hardware product underlined with technology. So how can we create that globally, value-added product in India, like more of them?
So we're not a giant. We're still a fledgling, I think, maybe toddler to a teenager evolution, correct? I think. And every time this concept of fractals, which exists in HCL as a founder, every time something becomes big, you fractalize.
Right.
So the concept of fractals is like cauliflower. But you keep kicking the stem, it looks like the same, so that so software was primarily, the whole idea was, can we build in India and take it global? And that was a trigger point. Now we look at deep tech. I think I want to just a little bit deviate away from that point that you don't need to always link with hardware. See, what happens is you have to link the stack.
Mm-hmm.
So the best example of this is what the government has done with the Gulf Stack, correct? You basically build a digital public infrastructure. So people always look at infrastructure and they think roads and other. But what we've done is we built a neutral public infrastructure on which you can plug in. The reason the fintech example is because the fintechs now don't need to worry about KYC identity. They're just able to innovate on use cases because
I can tell you how many times people globally have asked me about a car card.
Yep. Absolutely. So I think that's foundational infrastructure, correct?
Yeah.
Similarly, I think for doing deep tech, few things which I think maybe potentially what we are doing is that we are acquiring that layer above that deep tech is where you build applications.
Yeah.
Because one of the things is that if you build on a platform where you do not have more flexible, so we're doing a couple of changes. We believe we will disrupt the enterprise software industry by two things. The software industry was all product industry was designed one size fits all, everyone fits into my model. We are using this theme from DNA, we call it the 23andMe model. We believe that common software, but you have to get customers to really value. We have 100 commerce customers doing 360 billion of GMV on our platform. Our competitors have 10,000 customers doing 2 billion or 20 billion. So the difference is that we're able to take that one for 179, correct? And that's what the value is, because that's when they start to trust. What we've done, we moved away from object code licensing to source code licensing. You're going to tell the customer, you want trust? How do you build trust? The whole theme of Davos is trust. We license source code. You build on top of it. I'll make sure that we'll give you IP rights. We've done something with startups in India. We made a amazing product. Deep. They have AI on customer data platform, running out of cash in 3 months. Okay, gone. They'll go past. What we did, we were looking at building. So we have the strategy of build, buy, and ally. We went and gave that startup a few. We negotiated a deal. We did a source code licensing. We said it's your IP. Give me a source code license. We'll pay you some royalty model. I will package and take it to the globe. We just infuse cash. The startup is going to live for another 2 years. So things like this we could do differentiated is what. On the deep tech, I think my request to the government is some of the foundational capabilities on deep tech, like this blockchain infrastructure.
Yeah.
Could you open it? Because I think this crypto world has confused the hell out of blockchain. Right? If you land records, non-repudiation, things like it's like it's a new
Smart
database,
contract,
correct? SQL Server, or you have blockchain. Maybe that's something which could be built as a foundation capability. I think in deep tech, I would say a bit more space is all. We've always been ahead on space, but more push on space tech is one. Quantum computing.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be because materials, like you could work on materials, correct?
Yeah.
If you had a computer which could simulate materials based on the materials properties, so things around that, if you could start to look at those pieces, and then obviously some good work happening on language models and all, which is we are a country with 300 plus variants of languages, correct? You can't take GPT and then say go and do this, correct? If you start speaking Maithili, it will just get confused, correct? And you have to have contextualization.
Exactly.
So we are a very different country. So I think those foundational infrastructure allow more deep tech to build in. What we are doing is, as HCL Software and HCL Tech, building a lot of R&D capability into India.
Yeah.
We're partnering with a lot of these agencies. We had a little bit of a component in the Chandrayaan, Mangalyaan. We've been putting some of this work, collaborating with the industry. But the key is that more and more we start to figure out, I think some work happening on semiconductor.
Yeah.
That's going to be a very important thing. Because when you start building deep tech, you need to have some level of semiconductor ecosystem.
Absolutely.
Those things will help. And I think we will do what we can do as enterprises.
Yeah.
But I think as we build around this ecosystem, there will be play around this.
Absolutely. Great. I mean, you talked about the national quantum computing infrastructure. The government has just launched the National Quantum Computing Mission, about 6,500 crores layout. So the infrastructure has been created, and I hope the delivery will be soon to be seen. Tanvi, I'll come to you, and you come in and you've dealt with the world of blockchains and in the world of, I won't say cryptos, but crypto is quite a buzzword around the promenade.
It is in Switzerland, but not for the Swiss banks.
Not for the Swiss banks. So, but in general, like I had the honor yesterday of asking the RBI governor what are his views on cryptocurrency and its future. I'll pose the same question to you. How do you see cryptocurrency evolving, as a matter of fact? Or rather, he was bullish on the foundational tech of blockchain, as Kalyan mentioned earlier.
Yes.
But in terms of like crypto or even applications on blockchain, how do you see it evolving?
So I would definitely differentiate between crypto and blockchain.
Absolutely.
And half the time in conferences and discussions, that's the first thing we have to differentiate. I represent also Global Blockchain Business Council. So
Right.
if India decides to build an infrastructure and be clear, it's not the crypto regulations, it's not about the trading of
Yeah.
Bitcoin, it's not a Bitcoin ETF we are talking about, it's building in, to Kalyan's point, the rails,
Yeah.
the infrastructure into blockchain. That's what we stand for. It has been around for a long time, but this year it definitely has a repercussion. I see it. I've seen a lot of blockchain, good blockchain companies whose core product was to be able to do digital identity, whose core product was to talk about KYC and AML for blockchain and blockchain analytics, all cool stuff, nothing to do with the coins. But as the coin market comes down, which has been a difficult year, 2023, for a lot of good blockchain companies to survive, I feel 2024 is absolutely different. Fundamentally, so we talk about trust. That's the theme always. And blockchain stands for trust.
Absolutely.
And AI stands for black box.
Yes.
So what I am very keen about, and I'm looking at a few opportunities into investing and into working together with companies, which would be the confluence of the two.
Right.
Actually, I'm speaking on a panel later today that we are debugging or demystifying what that really means. But it's the confluence of the two, and when it comes to deep tech, when it becomes the confluence of quantum with AI, when it becomes the confluence of blockchain and AI, that helps and supports each other. I mean, if you look at AI, it helps blockchain.
Absolutely.
You get better quality oracles, you get better quality code, you can use it for debugging, you can use it for 1,000 things. But the other way around is even more powerful. I mean, we have put in our data into ChatGPT, and how much of it we continue to keep doing every day. We are making that set of model very, very rich with our interactions, right?
Yeah.
But we don't have any control over that data. We don't know what is being transformed, what biases we have put in. So there's no trust and transparency on the models we are using. So if we can get onto the ride of this whole generative AI hype, I mean, in Switzerland, even our cars are AI. How many of you noticed there are cars outside? Some of the rented cabs that had AI on their number plates. Did anybody notice? So look at the streets when you go out,
Yeah.
because we already have a state that's called Appenzeller Interroden, and that's AI.
Yeah.
So it just magnifies the hype on AI in the country and also worldwide. You know, the most well-attended session at the WEF was not any politician, but Sam Altman yesterday at Bloomberg,
Yeah.
right? So we all know about that. But the fact is, what is real and what is hype? The real thing is that let us get away from the fact that we have another centralized big trillion-dollar
Mhm.
company that is even going to abuse us more because it's going to have a lot more personal data, given that we all
Yeah.
use ChatGPT. How many of you use the paid version of GPT? Just a few. I thought like
Yeah.
there would be many more when I myself do. So can't complain on that. But we have no access to our data. We have no
Yeah.
control of our data. We don't get paid for our data. In the beginning, it would look like sense. But if you accumulate it over the years, and if all of us are going to be working with conversational agents
Yeah.
and not reading the websites or not typing ourselves, you're going to be very lazy people as humanity going forward slowly.
Precisely.
So it's very important that we start building in the confluence of some of the technologies to solve some real world challenges.
And risks
I think
involved, yeah.
India is very well geared towards doing this because you are a developed country, you're a developing country, and you are a non-developed country, right?
Yeah.
We are all three of it in the big state
Yeah.
that we are in. So we can do in India, I think it's going to be hard for any one country to think about because either they're very developed or they're developing or they're underdeveloped like Africa.
Yeah.
And there are so many, to your point, there's so many younger generation in the country that it's very easy to adopt, like the way the fintech is
Yeah.
amazing in India. It's better than Switzerland. I mean, last time when I was in November in India, it works perfectly,
Perfect.
amazingly well, right?
Yeah.
So if you could ride the wave on fintech, you could ride the wave on the
Deep
deep tech as well.
Absolutely. On
Just
that
one-
note,
I had just one point. I think I was in a panel just before this.
Yeah.
I had two principal secretaries on two sides for two states, and this whole discussion on AI came in. He brought a very interesting point. Very, saying as governments and that India, Bharat, and Bharatvarsh, correct? We have
Yeah.
these three.
layers, yeah.
If you cannot explain and you can't understand what's happening, it's very hard from a government standpoint to just go and say apply AI everywhere, correct?
Yeah.
Hence, that whole culmination of blockchain and AI. I think I met a small startup called Casper. They're very interesting. They're trying to solve this problem in a very different way. But I think connecting that to explainability is going to become very, very important. Because if you don't do that, I think trust will again be a big issue.
So on that note, we've heard, we've had a very insightful panel. On that note, I'll throw the panel out in terms of, the questions from the audience and anybody wanting to have a few questions. We're running short on time, so we'll keep it quick. And anybody would like to ask anything, feel free. Anyone? Deep tech is hard to comprehend, though. I can understand. Yeah. Go ahead, please.
So, ma'am, you talked about black box, essentially. So, both in blockchain.
Ma'am, we don't call me ma'am. Not used to listening back
Okay,
at all
sorry,
in our
so
word.
we are in a habit actually. So when we do engineering, we are told to call sir and ma'am basically. I cannot help you. So essentially, when we talk about black box, both tech in AI, what we are developing, and blockchain, we have black boxes. And when the solution goes to either government or government organizations, they ask for that explanation what's inside the black box. So how do startups or tech companies like us make sure that IP that we have is protected and it doesn't go out? That is something which we grapple with, and we are, because it's still developing. We are having something like AgriStack, lot of stacks happening at different stages, and they are all asking for solutions for blockchain. So I would want to understand. And yesterday we had a discussion where we were talking about a ministry of
AI.
AI.
Yeah, in India.
So we would definitely want to have sir's opinion
Yeah.
also on, because that is another past of question.
Yeah.
So we would want to have an opinion on that as well. Ministry of AI in government of India.
So in fact, Tanvi, you could answer that question, but I'll just intervene and, probably pose the last question even to Sir. That, Sir, India's position as far as the global IP regime is concerned, at times it's questionable, but over the last, the deep tech policy is already out where we've actually proposed a lot of strengthening of the IP regime in India. How do you see it evolving? That would be my question, and then Tanvi could end it. So, yeah.
So, IPR regime in India is, in our view, entirely compliant with TRIPS. It is compliant with national law. We've tried to make the processes a bit more friendly, smooth, faster, because there have been some complaints in the past from the ease of doing business point of view, particularly on the pharma side, where Switzerland, of course, has a lot of big companies in that space where there is a feeling that our concern is that there is too much of evergreening going on. Their concern is that there's too much of pre-grant opposition leading to delays in getting products up and running in India. It's a tricky issue. We'll probably try to further improve this after the elections are over, because legislative changes are not possible right now. But in terms of business process reengineering, we've done a lot, and you can see the results already in terms of the patent filings in India really going up exponentially in the recent past, particularly by domestic companies and Indian residents, but also by foreign companies as well.
There's a fun fact about the IP you mentioned, sir. It's because the IP registering cost in India is 50,000 rupees, while if you're trying to register an intellectual property with the lawyers in Switzerland, it's 50,000, but in Swiss francs. So I have started to see a lot of Swiss going to India and registering their patents there. So perhaps there is an opportunity to raise price there.
If we do that, we'll again have to provide concessions for women, for startups.
Okay, to answer to your question, if you're in a regulated industry like finance, banking, pharmaceuticals, healthcare, you would always need to have explainability. And that's why I always ask people to differentiate between what is data science and what is AI. Because as long as you're using black box models, which are the neural nets, you don't know how the output comes out, it is not explainable. So as much as we love it, as much as the output is so much more better and accurate, it's not allowed to be used in anything which is regulated. So we have been using a lot of machine learning, but there's very little AI that gets to use when you're trying to interact with your clients. Areas that are very heavy on regulations. So you can totally use neural nets in order to make a chatbot to talk to your IT or make a chatbot to talk to internal employees, but it is literally impossible to get the regulations cleared with a neural net on that topic on areas that they care about, which is giving recommendations to the clients, talking about how you determine mergers and acquisitions as some of the examples. Where blockchain comes into the picture is what makes it super interesting. So also for the financial industries to bring this together, but just in general, the ChatGPT. So it can now create a provenance of the data it's been trained on. So you know it's not bad data, that you have the entitlement to use it. It's not the New York Times fighting with ChatGPT that you've been using our content and no court cases. So that's point number one. You know that there's the right representations of your sample. So it's not just white males data, it's not just male data, and it's not just data coming in from the developed world, right? So that's the second part of the provenance that helps you. The third part is if I am contributing to the data in my own special way, and that's what's going to lead the whole exercise on getting more effective models for low cost, which is high quality data and less volume data. That's again going to be possible through provenance. So that's where blockchain comes into the picture. I cannot name any company today that is trying to build something that all of us can say, okay, that's the role model.
Yeah.
But if the agents are going to be talking to agents very quickly, explainability becomes important. If your data is there, and with the neural nets now on blockchain, you can talk about, I looked at those parameters, it did not work well. That's why I looked at those parameters. That's why I ignored that parameter. That's what neural net does. It's all going to be on the chain, right? So the explainability becomes really amazing. So far, the trends on both blockchain and AI have been super hard. AI was only available to big organizations that could spend hundreds of millions of dollars. Most of the money goes to tech firms like HCL, trying to build those solutions. But now, with the advent of technology, so much more with generative AI, it is going to be possible to do something within a return of investment that everybody can look at.
On that note, in fact, you spoke of the word role models. We have two deep tech role models, 1 minute each, but I'll give you a final message to the global audience as far as a deep tech startup is concerned in India. Captain Nikunj first, Agnish will last.
As you said, and we said that's a camel's journey. You need to continue on that.
I take the IP of the camel horse.
Absolutely. And don't give up. That's very important because the ecosystem is coming up. And most important for us is the semiconductor ecosystem to really come up fast in the country.
Yeah.
Because deep tech has a combination of hardware and just not the software. It's a combination of both. So we need that, and that needs to come in very fast.
Thank you, Captain Nikunj.
Firstly, I'd like to publicly thank all of you all. You've all been role models to me, and just watching you speak, watching you operate, and actually sharing the panel with you has been a blessing and a dream for me. Extremely grateful for the opportunity. But from my perspective, I feel being in the drone space where we have been fitting hardware with other hardware in terms of probes, sensors, magnetometers, high-powered lasers, sprayers, cameras to capture data in never before seen ways. I feel the future of deep tech will be a combination of hardware, software, data, and AI. I think if you can merge and integrate the power of all of these four, it will create a robust economy in wherever geographical location that you can fathom. And from an India perspective, I feel we as a country have the ecosystem already in place for all of those four major sectors: hardware, software, data, as well as AI, to all flourish within the next 5 years. Because, like Sir said, like Tanvi ma'am said, we have the infrastructure in place already. And all we need to do is continue the course and with a lot more vigor and passion. And I believe that India turning into a superpower, turning into becoming one of the top two economies in the world will happen driven on and based on deep tech evolution. And I think we're very happy to be part of that journey, contributing towards that, and with a very, very passionate leader towards deep tech in Shri Narendra Modi ji, I believe that India will definitely become a global superpower in years to come, powered by the deep tech revolution.
Thanks, Agnish. Thank you, everyone, and thank you to the esteemed panel. Thank you.